Hola, and with that, we're back again. Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
Hola, I'm Robert Nisbet.
Hola, that's a great way to start the show. It's a positive show today because we're going to talk about a serious subject. It is what? February the 21st, it's Thursday.
2013.
We're going to be out there and we're going to be in front of Ron Cannon's office in just a bit, but we're going to talk about police brutality while we warm things up. It's Radio Free Canada. We're here for the out-of-the-box thinker, those people who are along with us. Let's run this clip.
Hey now, guys, better mind what you do. The man's gonna come 'cause he's looking for you. Hey now, guys, better mind what you do. The man's gonna come 'cause he's looking for you.
A lot of people say police on the East Coast use racial profiling, and that's simply not true.
Oh, you meant there's a black man in a supermarket?
How do you turn this thing off?
Black male at a bus stop.
I pulled over a suspicious vehicle on Barrington Street. Stand by for backup.
Sorry, officer, was I speeding?
Oh, no.
Is there a problem?
Oh, there certainly is.
I didn't go through a stop. Why'd you pull me over?
Because you're black? The suspect seemed disoriented. He didn't understand simple questions. He seemed to be on something. They're like that, right?
But I am complying with your demands. Look, I have registration and identification. If you just let me get out of the car, I'll show you.
Just put your hands out the window, please, sir. Okay, now open your door, please. I said hands out the window, Snoop Dogg.
Look, I can't exactly open the door like this.
Suspect was becoming hostile. He was not cooperating, and I believed he did not understand my commands, and that's when I called in the translator.
I'm asking you to put your hands outside the window. Oh.
I'm East Indian.
East Indian, African, Canadian, color, whatever you people are calling yourselves this week.
You shizzle her nizzle, dog.
Just another day keeping Eastern Canada's streets safe.
All units, black woman in shopping center. All units, please respond. Black man on City Street.
Oh, say it's not so.
Oh no, our cops wouldn't use racial profiling.
There's no racial profiling here in Canada, is there? Oh, wait a second. Unless you're Aboriginal, then the statistic is 10 times more likely to go to jail.
Yes, of course, if you're white, you could get shot.
Just remember, we are talking about solutions with police brutality, but the only way to get a solution is to start talking about the problem. And that's what Major News is not doing. That's why we created Radio Free Canada. And
Yes.
let's run some news clips. What have you got?
Well, I got this first story from Vancouver Island where an RCMP officer actually thought he was in L.A.
Okay, let's run the clip. You make up your own mind. This is Radio Free Canada. This is the way we do it.
A Vancouver Island RCMP officer has been convicted of aggravated assault. It's been nearly 4 years since Constable David Pompeo took aim and fired at an unarmed man during a traffic stop. The victim was critically wounded and has maintained from the beginning that the shooting was unprovoked and was unjustified. And today a judge agreed. CTV's Scott Cunningham reports.
A career in law enforcement may end now that Constable David Pompeo is on the other side of the law. Today he was convicted of aggravated assault in the shooting of an unarmed man during a traffic stop.
I felt that finally I was believed that, you know, that I wasn't a threat to him, and he had no reason whatsoever to almost kill me.
Pompeo shot Bill Gillespie 4 years ago when he was a member of the Duncan, North Cowichan RCMP. It happened in the driveway of a Chemainus home. Pompeo maintained he fired his gun when he thought Gillespie was reaching for a weapon of his own. Pompeo now works for the Nanaimo detachment, where his future is uncertain. As the RCMP reviews the judge's ruling, top brass are also grappling with what could be a landmark decision as far as use of force.
It's something that impacts policing, definitely. It's a finding in terms of fault upon one of our officers. So what can I learn from that? What information is in there that the RCMP could be educated by?
A sentencing date has not been set, leaving a man who chose a career on one side of the law, waiting to see what his fate will be on the other side. Scott Cunningham, CTV News, Duncan.
So, you know, they're trying to report. I don't know what kind of spin they're trying to put on this.
I'm not sure. He may still have his job.
He may still have his job. He shot an unarmed guy. Okay, and that's the statistic. That's the fact.
Now, we call it aggravated assault. Is that the same as assault with a deadly weapon?
Two sets of rules, and that's the big problem that we have in society. Also, cops have extraordinary power. Now, remember that. They have extraordinary responsibility, but they're never held to extraordinary justice.
Yes. I like what the supervisor had to say about what they can learn from this incident.
What can we learn from this? What do you think?
Maybe they shouldn't pull out their guns and shoot unarmed citizens.
Okay. So, when you're talking about the big thing and some of the solutions, we need to put a sign that says in front of the cops every day, do not shoot unarmed citizens.
Well, 6 months training.
Oh, yeah, I know. And apparently that sign isn't put in front of those students. I want to cover this one, too, because this is pretty important.
This is really important. This is a huge human rights abuse story.
Okay, so let's do it. You be the judge.
On Wednesday, a report by Human Rights Watch revealed that the Native people are not just suffering from poor living conditions. The rights body said it has documented reports of Canadian police mistreating Aboriginal women. The group says many of these women have reported excessive use of force, strip searches, as well as physical abuses and sexual assaults by male officers. According to Human Rights Watch, dozens of murders and disappearances of women have been reported in the country's northern regions. On Thursday, Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper brushed off calls for an inquiry into reports of violence against Aboriginal women. Harper says the government has no information about allegations of abuse committed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. He, however, said that a commission would pursue the claims. He asked the victims to go ahead and report abuse cases. But Human Rights Watch sharply criticized Harper, saying the Premier's response ignores the lack of meaningful accountability for police misconduct. The group also said Harper failed to address the Native women's fear of police retaliation that's been preventing them from reporting mistreatment. The Canadian government is already facing widespread discontent from the Native population, and more protests are likely to erupt, with Aboriginals demanding justice for the victims of police abuse.
Now, we got to put this in light of the fact that in 2007, a sergeant stood forward and said sexual discrimination in the RCMP is systemic.
Yes, he did.
Okay, she did.
Oh, she did, right.
And we ran that story. We asked about, Major News, how much research have you done on this? None.
Well, they have more important things to report on.
Yeah, like Justin Bieber, royalty, and a cruise ship apparently had some trouble where 5 people had a problem.
Oh, well, these are important news stories.
But, okay, Stephen Harper really got raked over the coals in the major media with that one, saying if you're abused by a cop, report it to a cop.
Yeah, how's that going to be a solution? And they'll appoint a commission to look into it.
Oh, yeah, they'll appoint a commission. It's like sending accountants to the Indian band. Now they're going to appoint a commission to look into it, but not a national public commission.
No, of course
No
not.
Accountability. Remember, the government is not about accountability. I want to run this.
Of course, the hits just keep on coming.
Okay.
A day after the RCMP was accused by an international human rights organization of abusing Aboriginal women. Today, the force's civilian watchdog responded to allegations made by female Mounties themselves. And tonight, some of them aren't happy with the findings. The CBC's Natalie Clancy has reported extensively on this story for us, and tonight has the details. Natalie.
Peter, the head of the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP reviewed files on 700 harassment complaints from Mounties and concluded the RCMP has a big problem. Ian McPhail launched his investigation just 9 days after our stories about female Mounties claiming sexual harassment on the job. But McPhail says that's the least of the force's problems. He read 63 submissions and interviewed 37 people in a force of 19,000. But this report says the Mounties should continue to investigate themselves with a centralized senior RCMP executive in charge who is outside the chain of command. Some Mounties say women are still afraid to complain. All this comes on the same day Ottawa revealed Commissioner Bob Paulson's action plan to rid the RCMP of harassment. It includes the creation of a confidential and speedy complaint process, updating anti-harassment training, and boosting female membership in the force from 20% to 30%. All this change comes when rank and file tells CBC they still fear bosses will use new powers to fire complainers. CBC has obtained this letter advising several Mounties on sick leave after complaining about harassment that they are not considered employable and the force will initiate your administrative discharge. But tonight the RCMP denies complainers are being fired. Commissioner Bob Paulson refused our request for an interview, but in an email writes he's already making progress in transforming the RCMP into a respectful workplace for women. Peter?
Natalie Clancy in Vancouver.
And of course, you can always count on CBC to spin it right towards the RCMP right at the end.
Yes, of course.
You know, the last thing that you hear, they're making changes. What changes?
And they should continue to investigate themselves. Oh, that's working out real well.
Yeah, really. Okay, Robert Jacansky murdering people on camera and getting away with it. Credibility gone. Okay, just flat out.
Completely.
You know, and I can't say this enough. I did raise my kids to trust the cops. I said, if you got a problem, go to the cops. Now I cannot say that. And, you know, until they make real changes and start getting some accountability and transparency, how can you trust them?
Well, they can just fire the people.
Yes,
that
and
are
that's
making
what they're
complaints.
doing.
Yeah,
Because you remember, it's an internal club with no transparency, so you can complain on the inside and they threaten to kill you. That is one thing that I've talked about with a lot of women outside of the police brutality spotlight.
Yeah.
Okay, that women getting a divorce from an RCMP officer often get threatened with death if they complain.
Of course, the fascism still continues in government.
Man, you want to run this? Okay, now, these cops whom we know we can't trust and who refuse to fix their problems, they're going to get extraordinary powers.
Yeah.
Let's check it out.
Canada's ruling Conservative Party is in the process of ratifying yet another controversial and potentially unconstitutional piece of legislation, which is ostensibly aimed at ensuring loyalty to the Canadian state. Bill C-425 will allow the Canadian state to revoke citizenship from those deemed to have engaged in what law enforcers decide is terrorism or an act of war against Canada. Analysts say that Canada's current government's obsession with what it calls loyalty to Canada and support for Canada's military could be a case of they who doth protest too much. Politicians, such as Canada's Immigration Minister Jason Kenney, consistently prioritize the national interests of Israel over those of Canada, which entails putting Canadian troops in harm's way to fight those in the Muslim world who have never uttered a threat at Canada, but who are unwilling to tolerate US-Israeli human rights abuses. Canada's immigration minister has displayed a willingness to define people whose opinions he disagrees with as terrorists. For example, peace activist George Galloway was unlawfully barred from Canada in 2009 when Jason Kenney's office labeled the pro-Palestinian British MP a terrorist.
In official Canadian government documents publicized around the world, that I was not just a supporter of terrorism, but a member of a terrorist organization, and that I was a threat to Canada's national security.
Forcing dissidents and activists into exile abroad is a quintessential characteristic of a totalitarian state. Critics wonder if resisting or even criticizing unlawful wars of aggression involving Canada will be viewed as justifications to revoke Canadian citizenship and send Canadian dissidents into exile in the future. Joshua Blakeney, Press TV, Calgary.
So coming up, we're going to do another segment on police brutality because we've got a lot more to cover. This is a pretty big story.
That we do.
The statistics that we're presenting to you, we want you to make sure that you do your own investigation on this. And remember, they're not telling the whole story. Not once did they mention the fact that these cops only get 6 months of training and then they're expected to do their job.
And what's their maximum penalty? Days off without pay?
Days off without pay. It's a crime, but it's got to be fixed. I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
We're going to be right back with more updates for you. Stay tuned. And remember, Police Brutality 2012 and Castanet removing our video unlawfully, and we're fighting it. Stay tuned for more. We'll be right back.